Happy Burns Night, everyone. I hope you've got your mashed neeps and haggis to one side. Last year we marked Burns Night with one of my father's short stories called Murder So Cool, which I will put on the YouTube channel as well. This year I had wanted another reading of a story that has a Scottish theme called The Shooting on the Moss, but I only thought of it a couple of days ago, and I asked the rock singer Doogie White, formerly of Rainbow, if he might do it, because he's got a great voice. I knew he'd do it well, but I didn't give him enough time, and he's going to go on tour, but he is going to do it, so that will come later. So we'll have a little Burns Night a bit later, perhaps in a few weeks or so. So for today, you've just got me reading a little section from my dad's autobiography, Pipe Dreams. And I've chosen the section called Wildfowling because it describes a shoot on the Solway Firth, which my father loved and revisited many times. So here we go. By 1962, I had passed my driving test and bought my first vehicle, a Ford Thames van, which cost £420 on the road. Petrol was 5 shillings or 25p a gallon. Hence I was able to pursue my sporting activities further afield. My interest in wildfowling, the pursuit of duck and geese on coastal marshes, began. Like many of my fellow sportsmen, I headed up north to the Solway Firth, that wild and dangerous estuary where some 25,000 geese from Greenland and Iceland wintered every year. It was the start of a new adventure for me, one which I followed annually for the next 20 years. A goose was a coveted prize. Many visiting gunners returned home empty-handed, for these birds were gun-wise. Every evening they flew back from their feeding grounds on the fields inland to roost on the mudflats. Each morning they departed, fully aware that a line of shooters hidden in the creeks on the marshes would be awaiting them. Their safety lay in height, and by the time they reached dry land, they were usually well out of gunshot, except when there was a strong gale blowing. Every fowler prayed for stormy weather. Calm weather, unless one was extremely lucky, boded a blank week, sometimes returning home without having fired a shot. It was the thrill of the chase, hearing that wild chorus from those battalions in the sky, which drew one back year after year. I will always remember my first goose shot on my third Solway visit. I was standing on the rear of the Merse, Green Marsh, with about a dozen other fowlers lined out in the gorse bushes at about 20-yard intervals. The geese were high that morning, but in due course a skein of 6 headed our way, much lower than the previous ones had been. A salvo of shots rang out. None were hit, and they immediately began to rise higher. I took an overhead shot, and a bird folded, plummeted down onto a ploughed field behind me. As I negotiated the barbed wire fence, trembling with excitement and almost disbelief, a spaniel dashed past me. Whether or not one of the other shooters had sent it to retrieve and steal my goose, a common occurrence on the foreshore, or it had just broken free of its tethering, I never found out. Anyway, that dog beat me to my goose, but as it was too large and heavy to hold in its mouth, it began dragging it along the ground. I caught up with it, rugby tackled that spaniel, and proudly walked back with my prize. On the last morning, before I was due to leave, I bagged a second goose. That was certainly a week to remember. I also used to visit the Wash, a much more challenging fowling area than the Solway, with its mud and quicksand. Here the geese were even harder to come to terms with, but I managed to bag a couple out of 3 or 4 trips. And then he goes on to describe some shooting on Black Hill, where I grew up. Happy Burns Night. Enjoy your your whiskey or your iron brew, your mashed neeps and your haggis or whatever you're going to have, or just raise a glass. Mine's red wine. Yes, and we'll look forward to Doogie's rendition of The Shooting on the Moss in due course. Take care.